The man who never gave up, the inspiring story of Abraham Lincoln. In a small wooden cabin, deep in the cold forests of Kentucky, a baby was born who would one day change the destiny of a nation. His name was Abraham Lincoln. He wasn't born into wealth or power. He didn't have fine clothes or books or teachers. His family was poor and life was hard. But even as a child, there was something different about Abraham. He was curious. He asked questions. He wanted to learn, to understand the world beyond those silent trees. At night, he would sit by the fireplace, reading borrowed books by the light of a dying flame. His mother used to say, "Don't let the darkness around you stop you from seeing the light inside you." He never forgot those words. When Lincoln was just 9 years old, his mother died. He cried for days, but he made himself a promise that he would make her proud one day. As he grew up, he worked wherever he could, chopping wood, carrying water, lifting bricks. He had less education than a 10-year-old child today, but what he lacked in schooling, he made up for in determination. He read everything he could find. He studied law by candlelight. He borrowed books from neighbors and returned them full of notes. And slowly, that poor farm boy began to dream of something bigger, of a world where every person mattered, no matter how poor, how weak, or how different. But life tested him again and again. He failed in business. He ran for state legislature and lost. He tried again and lost again. He failed in love. His sweetheart in Rutledge died young, and Lincoln fell into deep depression. He once said, "I am the most miserable man alive. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would not be one cheerful face on earth." Most people would have given up, but not Abraham. Every time life knocked him down, he stood back up, a little slower, but stronger than before. In 1846, he was finally elected to Congress. It should have been a moment of victory, but politics was cruel. His ideas were mocked, his speeches ignored. He left Congress in silence, believing his career was over. He returned home and started again from nothing, a simple lawyer, reading books under the same dim light he had known as a boy. But inside him, a fire burned. He saw America changing, a country divided by slavery, torn by hatred. And one night, as he looked out over the dark fields of Illinois, he whispered to himself, "This is not the world my mother dreamed of." Years later, he decided to try once more, to run for president. Everyone laughed. They said, "He's too poor, too plain, too awkward." They mocked his tall frame, his rough clothes, his simple face. But Lincoln didn't care. He wasn't fighting for fame. He was fighting for freedom. And in 1860, against all odds, Abraham Lincoln became the 16th president of the United States. But his hardest battle had just begun. Soon after, the nation tore itself apart in the Civil War. Families fought against families, brothers against brothers. Hundreds of thousands died. Lincoln was hated by half the country. He received death threats every single day. He carried the pain of every fallen soldier like it was his own, but he refused to give up. He said, "I am not bound to win, but I am bound to be true. I am not bound to succeed, but I am bound to live by the light that I have." In 1863, standing before a broken nation, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, the declaration that ended slavery in America. The words were simple, but their meaning thundered across history. All persons held as slaves shall be free. The boy who once had nothing had now given millions of people the one thing he always believed in, freedom. When the war finally ended, Lincoln didn't celebrate. He walked quietly through the White House halls, his heart heavy from the cost of victory. He knew the wounds of his country would take generations to heal. Just days later, on a cool April evening in 1865, Abraham Lincoln went to the theater with his wife, Mary. As the play went on, a man slipped behind him and fired a gun. Lincoln died the next morning, peaceful, calm, and free. The news spread like fire. The nation that once mocked him now wept for him. People lined the streets for miles as his coffin passed by. Men took off their hats. Women cried. Children threw flowers on the path. He had come from nothing, but had given everything. Speech balloon, and today, when people speak of greatness, they speak of him, not because he won every battle, but because he never gave up. Lincoln's story isn't just about politics or history. It's about faith. It's about standing tall when everything falls apart. It's about believing that your pain has purpose, that your failures are not the end. They are the beginning, because sometimes the world doesn't need a perfect hero. It just needs someone who refuses to quit. Light bulb moral of the story. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fall. Every time you rise again, you become stronger. And one day, your struggle will become someone else's hope. Abraham Lincoln failed 1,000 times, but he never stopped trying. And because he didn't, the world learned what true courage looks like. The man who never gave up, Abraham Lincoln. A story of failure, a story of faith, a story of light.